continue on this topic with our panel, a panel which will be moderated by Olivier Rikken from the Netherlands. He's one of the co-writers of the book. He's Director Blockchain and Smart Contracts at Axveco. And he also wrote an interesting report on smart contracts, which is distributed by the Dutch Blockchain Coalition last year.
Welcome everybody and welcome to this first panel discussion of today. Let me briefly introduce the panelists of today, and I welcome you all on stage, please, already. Please welcome Mr. Arjeh van Oijen, Mrs. Mona Zoet, Mr. Ryu Okada, Mrs. Jelena Kadir, Mr. Matt Stack, and Mr. Yoshiyuki Yamamoto. Briefly tell you in 2 minutes what the background of everybody is. Well, everybody knows Mr. Yoshiyuki already now, our special advisor for UN engagement and blockchain projects from UNOPS. Mr. Matt Stack, the managing director and co-founder of XLP Capital. Furthermore, Jelena, well, we just heard your story. Mona Zoet, who is the founder and the CEO of RegPac Revolution in Singapore, a end-to-end global RegTech ecosystem builder. Then we have Ryu Okada, who is the CEO and founder of Soramitsu, which is basically also the inventor of Hyperledger Iroka, if I say it correctly. And he has quite some ambition on building or developing the new decentralized world economic system. It all starts with ambition, obviously. And finally, we have Arjeh van Oijen, who works for Unchain, or actually is one of the founders of Unchain. I've been working with you guys for quite some time, who are building a solution for basically corporate incorporation of blockchains, which it comes down to. We prepared 3 statements for today, and given the time and the amount of speakers, we have to rush through it, so let's see how we do on that one. The first statement of today, we're going to talk about financial services and blockchain, obviously. And financial services is basically where it all started years ago. Almost 10 years ago now, the white paper was released, and the Bitcoin network was invented. And as it all started in the financial services, basically peer-to-peer value transfer without the need of a trusted third party, we would say that the financial services industry is the most mature industry, or the products and services related to financial services is the most mature that we see so far. So what I want to ask you to basically give your view on what do you see as the most promising products and services in the financial industry with regards to blockchain so far, and not the ones described high level, not the ones in proof of concept, but really the most interesting implementations. Mr. van Oijen.
Yeah, I can start. I have a background in banking for 30 years, so I think I can answer this question. Actually, there are many different applications in the financial service industry, but you see a lot of focus and attention at the moment for securities, clearing and settlement, and other types of financial instruments. Trade finance is a very interesting application area, especially because of the loads of information that is exchanged between financial institutions as well as their customers and the customs. And so it's not limiting anymore to just financial services, also all the parties involved in the chains with which financial institutions are exchanging data with.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for a fact, actually, Ryu, that you are working with a national bank on this part. Can you elaborate a bit more? You're working with the National Bank of Cambodia, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we are working. We are developing original permission blockchain called the Hyperledger Iroha. It is one of the 5 blockchains accepted by Linux Foundation, and we are working with the National Bank of Cambodia to create new payment system, utilize our technology. And you know about history. Suddenly, the person in charge of blockchain in National Bank of Cambodia contacted us, and we discussed about blockchain solution for several months. And finally, they decide to use our blockchain and also work with us, because they had 2 choices. just they wanted to create new payment system, and they have two choice, using blockchain or not. And they finally decided to utilize blockchain because blockchain is a kind of asset management including system. So if you use blockchain correctly, you can reduce initial costs and transaction costs also. So this is the reason why it is one of the reasons why they choose using blockchain.
Thank you very much. Matt, would you elaborate on this one a bit more? Or?
Sure. So you, first off, I have to disagree with your statement. I don't think financial services is the most mature. I think you have to segment that down. If you look at the first implementations of blockchain, specifically Bitcoin, you look at the forks and the very first code base had nothing to do with anything to do with financial services. In fact, it was simply a retail credit mechanism. And if we step back and we look at what it's done since then, blockchain has been highly focused on transactions. So I think on transactions, it's very mature. But financial services is not just transactions. Transactions are a small portion, kind of in the middle market of financial services. Here are two places where it fails miserably. I think blockchain fails miserably at delivering a service to governments. The principal government service required of a financial technology, a fintech, would be the permissibility of fractional reserving. And those of us in the room that know what fractional reserving is, it is the antithetical technology to the double spending rule, which is what Bitcoin is predicated against. So every government that has a blockchain pilot needs to ask very difficult questions about whether it's actually solving the problem. And the other category is it's blockchain, and to date, all implementations of blockchain technologies have failed to implement lines of credit for consumers. Lines of credit is not credit and a bond on a contract. It's the ability to fractionate or rehypothecate a consumer loan credit. So arguably 2/3 of financial services is still missing from the blockchain ecosystem. I think it's great on transactions. I think it's missed those other two.
It actually brings me to the second statement we want to discuss, and thank you for that one. And I do agree that we see a lot of interesting use cases outside the financial services, but we're going to focus on the financial services for this panel discussion, obviously. So that brings me to the second statement, and that is, what are the biggest lessons learned so far, and also the biggest challenges we see ahead of us before we can really say, well, we can go to mass adaptation of blockchain solutions. Mona, will you do the honors to start with that one?
Sure, I can do that one. Now, I think, first of all, I think blockchain is, of course, evolving, right? It is not something but has a solution immediately. I think when we first saw or talked about Bitcoin and blockchain, we really thought like, okay, one-off and you have the solution. We all know that there are different applications, different blockchains, so it will evolve and it will take a while. So I think that kind of adoption and really understanding what blockchain is relatively difficult for a lot of people to understand, and that will take a while before the adoption will come.
All right, thank you. Jelena?
In terms of main challenges, I would say scalability, right? So for example, in payments, speaking of financial services, no blockchain has yet been able to process billions of transactions in a second in a way that current banking payment systems can. Most of the projects are still in a pilot stage. I've struggled to actually find concrete use cases where, which is actually something that I was challenged to do by my colleagues at the organization, who said we hear so much about potential of blockchain and various consultants and service providers talking about the potential, but can we speak to an actual user who can tell us how they've been using it and the efficiencies that it's actually achieved, right? And then there are interoperability risks as well, because many existing interfaces for blockchain ledgers are too complex for mainstream adoption today, I think. And then energy consumption challenges. And finally, legal and regulatory, primarily privacy and data protection issues. And as I mentioned earlier, allocation of responsibility and accountability in the distributed ledger universe.
Would you respond to that?
Yes, when we're discussing with, when we see blockchain projects and there are all kind of consortium that now are launching production blockchain networks. And now they're starting to become aware that having the blockchain network as such is not enough, because organizations that want to participate in the network needs to integrate their existing applications with blockchain networks. Blockchain is never going to replace existing ERP, logistic systems or hospital systems. It's intended to a standardized and secure way of exchanging data between participants in a business network. And therefore what we have done is creating an integration solution to simplify and accelerate and also secure that kind of integration. Because we noticed that if you need to spend a lot of money to do that integration, a lot of organizations will back off and participate and have a wait and see attitude. And then you create a chicken and egg problem of if nobody is participating in the network, there's no traffic, and there's no traffic, it's not attractive for organizations to participate. So you need to break that chicken and egg issue, and that's what we intend to do.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, what you mentioned, Jelena, that when you were approaching people, everybody was talking about proof of concept. It's something we see in the market as well. Fortunately, we see things changing fast now. So we are building the first real life implementation. So not the real proof of concept, but really the next step. But given that fact, we're still in the early stage of the technology, that's for sure. Matt, you were dying to respond, and Yoshi, you as well? Or?
When we talk about challenges, I think we often talk about blockchain system itself, blockchain world itself. But the main challenge we're facing is interface between the so-called crypto economy and the real economy. And when it comes to real economy, as Matt said, what about the fractional reserving? This is a real problem. I think the biggest challenge is not blockchain itself, the scalability, technical part, etc. It's an interface. We are dealing with two economies, the crypto economy and the real economies. And the crypto economy is really small, few $100 billion. World economy is $100 trillion. So it's not a big issue yet, but when we're designing this blockchain-based project, we have to deal with how to deal with the entry point from real economy to the crypto economy, from exit point from crypto to real economy. That part is a big challenge for us at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say we need more cities like Arnhem in the Netherlands, where there are over 200 places where you can spend bitcoins. Actually, you can do your groceries over there. So that would help, most definitely. Matt?
Who here remembers IPv6? We all remember IPv6. We were going to run out of IP addresses. So you put a bunch of technologists from IBM in a room, and what do they cook up? A big, useless enterprise technology that none of us use, none of us know. Why? Because it turned out we didn't run out of IP addresses. We just went to Best Buy, we went to Radio Shack, and we bought routers. Blockchain needs routers. And today, the most viable technologies out there are things like proxy contracts and delegate contracts and bastardizations, if I can use that word, of smart contracts. The easiest way to raise $500,000 as a startup today is to copy and paste a legal agreement into a smart contract, just the text, it's not computable, put comments on everything, and then crypto hash that and post that on the blockchain. It doesn't do anything, it's not parametric, but you'll raise $500,000. I think the challenge is actually making those contracts parametric. You and I can get a futures contract right now. It says if the weather's out there is 91 or higher, I'll give you $5. If it's lower, you give me $5. But putting that on blockchain is this suddenly hand-wavy thing that's much more difficult than it needs to be. Why? Because we can't agree on a temperature reading. So blockchain's fine, but the parametric part that's going to enable all the smart contracts, that's a rat's nest, and that's the Wild West.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we come into what are the trustworthy oracles we can use in order to trigger the smart contract part. Absolutely. And that's one we and it all comes down to agreements that we make all together. Anyone else who wants to elaborate a bit more on lessons learned so far from the implementations? Because we see a lot of challenges, and that's cool because we're at the early stage of the technology. But the lessons learned so far from the first implementations, what have we learned so far that we can really use in order to speed up things into the future?
Maybe I can say something on that. I think we need to get rid of the technology and try to very in-depth understand blockchain. Because we also do not know how TCP/IP and HTTP and everything, and everyone makes use of the internet. We should more look into what it is able to do, and the biggest challenge is not so much in the technology, but getting everyone together in consortia or whatever, that you're going to use the same standards and the same, you have to come to a common agreement on how processes are going to work and how exceptions are, and there also you have the legal aspects. How is that embedded in the legal frameworks? And I see that by far more as the challenge to have everyone on the same page and working together rather than the technology that is evolving and thousands of people working on that, and that will be solved.
I completely concur in that as being the spokesperson for the Netherlands in the ISO standardization group. This is what we're talking about all the time, basically, to learn the same language. That's what it all starts with. Which actually brings me to the third statement, and that's basically, we see a lot of pilots and proof concepts and even live implementations coming out there, but aren't we letting history repeating itself? In other words, in a lot of cases, with our company, we see a lot of use case coming by that either are not blockchain use case or where blockchain is used for incremental improvement of an existing process. Or in other words, we're redesigning the things that we already did, but then on a new technology. I think one of the examples you could give there is the implementation of Ripple to replace Swift. Aren't we, in this case, basically just repeating history and not as open as we should be in rethinking and redesigning ecosystems? And as you have the ambition to build a completely new world economic system, maybe Rio, you would be the best one to start off with this one.
The world is becoming a more decentralized world. It's a trend. And we are developing new decentralized world economic system. We are focusing on more token distribution process. Bitcoin create money and distribute token to the only miner, right? But our ecosystem creates token every year, and this token almost all distribute to the project. People based on propose your project. So, and also user community decide which project have to receive new token. This is a decentralized, democratized token distribution process. Do you understand what I mean? So, yeah. So, there will be no ICO. We just want to create new cryptocurrency and also new economic system. So this is a redesigning of the new economics. Even startup, we can create new economy under a new financial system, under a new governance system. It's a challenging, but it's a big game changing. So I want to mention you, let's create new world together utilizing blockchain. This is my main message for you.
I see some hefty writing over there from Jelena. Do you want to respond, or?
I mean, I concur with that. I do think decentralization is actually a big game changer. Getting rid of intermediaries is very disruptive, right? But equally, I agree with what you said, that a lot of it is an incremental improvement to the existing processes, and that's probably more true of the permissioned blockchains, right? The private blockchains, the likes of, for example, the Swift's KYC registry. So which is going to be used by a defined universe of banks. Yep. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Matt, you were dying to say something.
I don't mean to disagree with, I'm not this, I have a real problem with the idea of consensus collaboration and co-development of blockchain. Bitcoin came out to destroy the financial system. Uber came out to destroy the taxi system. Google came out to destroy the information retrieval system. Everything that touches cryptography is meant to hide and encapsulate and obscure. If we're going to disrupt things, we shouldn't be so friendly about it. Because someone's going to lose and someone's going to win. And every technology that works disrupts and displaces other people. Some people get new jobs and other people lose theirs. So I worry, especially in forums like this, that we overinvest in things that sound good. Remember, good technology saves money. Saving money means higher margin, which means economic transfer of wealth, which is the whole point of blockchain and a lot of fintech. Especially if we're going to government innovations and consumer innovations. A lot of that intermediary stuff is just so. But on the fringes and on the edges, new economic systems, I think you got to be a little edgy.
I personally completely concur on that one, but anyone else who wants to react? Mona?
I agree with that. But on the other hand, just talking a little bit about RegTech, I mean, I agree that, you know, it can be disruptive, blockchain. But if you use it for RegTech, regulatory technology, then it is actually an enabler. So from that perspective, I don't think it's a disruptor, especially not in the financial services industry.
Anyone else? Yoshi?
Yeah, I work very closely with him, so I know what he's gonna say. Yeah, basically I agree with him. So many of the attempts and initiative under the blockchain is somehow go against blockchain's original philosophy. That is true. But at the same time, there are so many attempts to try to achieve the original philosophy of the Satoshi Nakamoto. So both sides exist. That's the one thing. Now, I'm curious about a little bit about the question that Jelena talked about this, earlier. You talk about some sort of a dilemma between the code of rule and the natural language, and how to mitigate these two different things. On the one side, it's on-chain governance. On the other side, off-chain governance. Two things still exist. How will you reconcile these things? What's your experience?
I think there were 2 contexts in which I was using that example. First, whether the question for lawmakers, whether the language provision, so the provision in your law that says contracts shall be written in XYZ language, whether it's broad enough to include code, right? That's the question, right? Is it technology, or does it have to? Is it specific in saying that it has to be a natural language, right? And so that was the first question. And then the other, when I was talking about off-ledger, it was more in the context of privacy and general data protection regulation in the EU, right? Where because of the privacy concerns, there have been attempts to circumvent GDPR requirements by having some data stored off-chain. I'm not sure if that's right. If that answers your question.
I'm generally curious about your experience because we trying to do the same thing, and then on the one side lawyers, on the other side the developer. The communication is not so easy.
Well, I guess there has to be some education on both parts, right? I mean, technologists need to educate themselves about regulations and laws, and equally regulators and lawmakers about technology.
That very actively drive at the moment, and really getting the law schools and the engineering schools together in order to learn each other's languages, because that's what we're going to need into the future, that's for sure. We'll stick to this then. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you will enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much.